Welcome back to another installment of the Quarantine Q&A here on the Westmoreland Sports Network. I'm your host, Sean Myers, joined by my trusty co-host, Dan Flickinger. We're talking to local high school athletic directors around Westmoreland County. Today we're joined by Franklin Regional's AD, Zach Kessler. Zach, thank you for taking the time. I know you've done a lot of preparation for this interview, so we look forward to it.
Thanks, Dan and Sean. Thanks for having me.
I want to get a little bit about your background because I know you've been a longtime athletic director at Franklin Regional, but you have some experience prior to that as well. So fill people in on your experience in athletics.
Sure. I mean, like most of the ADs, obviously sports have always been a big part of my life. My main sport was I played football all the way through high school, up through college at Allegheny College. Then when I finished college, I helped coach at Moon for 5 years as an assistant football coach. I actually helped coach the offensive line. From there, I actually was fortunate enough to be the AD at Moon. I was in that role for 3 years and then came here in the summer of 2007. And as you said, I'm just finishing up my 13th year here.
And you talk about football. Well, at Franklin Regional, football talk starts and ends with the legendary head coach, Greg Botta. He has been certainly a staple of that program for decades. And he did a good job once again producing another quality team in 2019, but it seems like it's an annual discussion now about his future. So what can you tell us in regards to Greg Botta's future as a head coach?
Sure. One of the great things, obviously Greg is just a staple here and in the county and in the Whippeal. I mean, he's very well thought of. I think sometimes he's actually underrated in the conversation of the best coaches in the Whippeal. But with him, he's had some great things happen recently. You know, he has 2 sons. They've both gotten married. They both have kids now. So obviously, he likes to travel. He likes to see them. Those are very, very positive things that are pulling at him, and we get that completely. You know, I tell him every year, you're my friend first. You know, do what's best for you. But, man, you do a great job with our kids, and we are very, very fortunate, you know, to have you. So that's an annual goal of mine is to hang on to Coach Botta and keep this thing going.
Zach, being able to work with him on a daily basis, especially, you know, obviously in the fall. I know he's retired from teaching and all of that, but being able to be friends with him, seeing him on a day-to-day basis in the fall, how he orchestrates practices and how he builds young men, builds kids into young men through his football program. What impresses you the most about Coach Botta and what he's been able to do? Not wins and losses necessarily, but just the way that he's been able to build, again, kids into young men.
I think you hit it. The best thing about him is that kids know that he cares. When a kid knows that you care about them, they become that much more coachable. You can motivate them, and there is no doubt how much he cares about those kids. He treats them like they're his own. I know a lot of coaches say that, but I get to see that. And you see that over and over as these kids come back after they graduate, you know, what he meant to them. And I think a lot of times that's why we overachieve. We may not always have the most talented teams, but you're always in for a fight because they're going to play hard for him and for each other. And that's just a credit to him as a man and to his character.
Yeah, I kind of compare Franklin Regional and Penn Trafford in that way in the football programs. You don't always see the D1 guys dotting the rosters, but you have 2 really good coaches there, and, of course, Greg Botta and John Ruane at Penn Trafford. And you play team-first football, and you play as a team, and you work extremely hard and are very well coached. And I think both programs are kind of comparable in that way.
Yeah, very similar. And you mentioned D1. We have had a few here and there, and as luck would have it, the year we had 5 or 6, that's when they won the state championship. I mean, as my principal likes to say, the number one key to any team is talent. I mean, you need talent to win. But yeah, like you said, it's just a lot of hardworking kids. We may not always be the biggest, the fastest, but football is the ultimate team sport. When you play together and you play the right way, good things happen.
Zach, numbers have been a challenge everywhere, football numbers, and hopefully we'll be able to talk about that this fall, whether the numbers are good or bad, because then we'll have sports. But I know Franklin Regional, that they've dropped a bit. What are some of the challenges there with getting more kids out to play football?
Right. I think a few years ago it started for us. We noticed a trend in the numbers. A lot of media attention to that. One of the bigger things was, people are more aware of concussions than ever. As a parent, I think about that too with my kids when they play sports. So I think that's part of it. I think another part of it is specialization. So many kids focus on that one sport. We prefer they play more than one sport. A lot of things have shown that's better for a kid, physically, mentally, and it gives you a better, well-rounded athlete. Coach Botta's really hit this challenge head on. You'll see him there. He's the old school coach. He's in the middle school cafeteria, during lunchtime. He's recruiting kids. He does that up here at the high school. He reaches out to our wrestling coaches each year because they make good football players. So he's always actively recruiting. We've seen an uptick in our numbers. Not enough to reinstate our 9th grade football team, but our numbers are on the rise, which is a positive.
Each and every year in the fall, football is certainly paramount at Franklin Regional, and with good reason, with the success that program has had. But I think this year it was maybe took a little bit of a backseat to the boys soccer team. What an incredible run, undefeated in the regular season, repeating as WPIAL champs, making a run through the state playoffs as well. What stood out about this year and the success that program had?
To me, it was the fact they were able to do it again. I mean, you never thought you could have topped last year, short of winning a state championship. And we graduated a lot of very good players from last year's team. And to watch the young guys step up is what was really impressive. Obviously, Anthony DeFalco is a tremendous player, and he's really what helped us go. And Connor Hudson, those guys make you go. But like any team, you can't have a weakness. And we had so many young guys step up. We had a brand new goalie this year. We didn't miss a beat, and that was the most impressive thing. Obviously not giving up many goals, and I think it was less than 10 again this year. Just a lot of fun to watch.
And certainly it looks like a team that's going to be built for success for years to come. Is it something you embrace, having those basically championship expectations, and anything short could be deemed a disappointment going into next season again?
Yeah, I think that's a fun pressure. Obviously only one team ends the year happy. As good as we were, we ended the last 2 years disappointed until you take a few weeks and look back at it and realize just how special it was. And not many teams win one championship, let alone back-to-back. So, yeah, they were disappointed, but I tell you what, those kids are already chomping at the bit. They want to go all the way this year.
And as part of our new features here on the Westmoreland Sports Network, in addition to the quarantine Q&A that we're doing here, we've also kind of featured some of the top teams in the 10 years of Westmoreland sports. And there's no doubt there's plenty of candidates from Franklin Regional. But another fall sport that's going to have a different look next year is going to be girls soccer. A new head coach, Scott Arnold, was hired. What went into that decision? What stands out about Scott?
With Scott, it's his enthusiasm and his organization. He's very, very thorough. He's an engineer by trade, and that comes across loud and clear when you meet with him. He has watched so much film already from last year. Has a big background primarily in the cup soccer world. Some of our girls have actually played for him previously. He's relatively local. He's from Norwin. 2 of his daughters played for their program over there. He's a good man. Seems to have a good head on his shoulders, good character, all the things we look for when you're entrusted with somebody's kids.
Zach, we're kind of bouncing around here a little bit, but we've obviously been talking to all of the athletic directors about the unfortunate cancellation of the spring sports season and just how sad it is, particularly for the seniors, to have their senior season. And we want everybody to be safe and healthy for sure, but it's still pretty sad for how long and hard they have worked to get to their senior year and enjoy their spring sports season, and to have it kind of ripped away from them is certainly something that's been tough. What have you kind of seen at Franklin Regional with the seniors, and what kind of spring season did you expect to have at Franklin Regional this year?
Well, we'll go to the expectations first. I think hope springs eternal, no pun intended, but we were very expectant this year. Baseball, softball, I think baseball was really geared up for another run. Softball, I think, was going to build off of their semifinal appearance from last year. Girls lacrosse, I think they had championship aspirations. The boys, they first playoff win in a while last year. They were looking to build on that. Boys tennis, they were section champs. They were all back. There's not a senior on that team, so they'll all be back next year. Track had won the last couple section titles. So, we were really excited. It's a bummer for everyone, but I think it stings a little more when you had such great expectations.
I had the opportunity to talk to both the baseball and softball coach, Coach Sadler, Coach Armstrong, heading into this season when I was doing the previews. Now, that never came to fruition, but both coaches had mentioned plans to head south.
Right.
It's certainly not exclusive to Franklin Regional. There's a lot of local baseball or softball teams that make that trek, whether it be to the Carolinas or to Florida. But that had to be so disappointing, and also logistically somewhat of a headache for those coaches and all the players and all the families that raised money. So can you kind of shed some light on how that ultimately played out?
Yeah, that was something we looked at early on, before coronavirus really came up this way. We had looked at, do we still let these teams go? And realizing how much money those parents and students had really poured into it. So we had meetings with them leading up to it. Fortunately, it worked out for us in the end. Those facilities had to close and cancel. So I believe they got most of their funds back, if not all. So that was a positive. Amongst all the negative, that was a positive. That's something they do every year because, as you guys know, you're not going outside in March unless you have a complete turf field. Mm-hmm. So, that's always a huge trip for us to get the season started right.
We talked about Greg Botta. I know one of his good friends is Jim Armstrong, the head coach of the softball team. A couple of old school guys there, but Jim, the same mold as Coach Botta with the way that he runs his program.
Yeah, they're very similar. We always tell Coach Armstrong that he's a little bit of a cartoon. He's so animated, but the girls love playing for him. He treats them like they're his daughters, but he is old school. He does things the way that have always worked. But a lot like Greg, he's also adapted over time because you just have to. You have to change a little bit as you go. You can keep your core values, but kids change, so you need to change a little bit. But yeah, they are pretty good friends. They confide in each other quite a bit and pick each other's brains, and that's something you see among our coaching staff. We have a lot of guys that have been here at least 5 to 10 years. They all, call on each other from time to time for help.
And one of the coaches who's had a lot of success in a short period of time is the boys basketball coach, Steve Scorpion. I've had a chance to talk with him quite a bit, and he's always interesting to talk to, has so much energy, but he's produced great success on the court. And really, when you look at the seasons he's had, he has pretty much had to, for the most part, replace the vast majority of his contributors from one year to the next, and it seems like really the team hasn't missed a beat.
Right. I think with him, it's a couple of reasons. He takes what he has and adapts. He doesn't just run a certain system. He looks and sees what he has. Similar, to football. We're not always the biggest, fastest. We're not the tallest, but he finds a way to get the most out of what he has and utilize them in a way that leads to winning. And when we hired him, one of the things he said is we're going to preach defense because defense travels. You can have an off night shooting, but you can play tough defense every night, and that's what took us to the Pete a couple years ago. We won a game 28-26 in the playoffs. That to him it was beautiful. Anybody else watching, they might have thought it was ugly, but he loved it. The kids got after it, and they feed off of his intensity. He is intense. There's no hiding that. He's the same way in practice, and he gets a lot out of those kids.
Defense and rebounding. Yes. That's the big thing for just like the old Pitt teams under Jamie Dixon. Defense and rebounding. Yeah,
very much so. It's not pretty, but it's working.
That's for sure. Zach, if we can stay with the winter sports, certainly the Franklin Regional Wrestling program, and it's interesting. We've been talking with the athletic directors here, and I feel like every AD that we've talked to in Westmoreland County, they have a great wrestling program, right? And we're talking to Franklin Regional now, talking about Franklin Regional, and they have a great wrestling program too. It just shows how big of a hotbed high school wrestling is in Westmoreland County. But another solid wrestling season for you. And, Matt Leby doing a great job with the program and more individual accomplishments and team accomplishments for Franklin Regional this season.
Yeah, it's funny. You get to a point where you have such high expectations. He may even tell you it was a little bit of a down year. But, to, again, make the playoffs in what is arguably one of the toughest sections in the state was good. We fell to a really good team in Seneca Valley. Individually, to get Carter Dybert back up there, Mason Spears got his medal as a senior. That was a tremendous moment this year to see what he did. Essentially that tournament earned him a spot on the Brown wrestling team. To see things like that is just tremendous. But it's not a surprise. When we hired Matt, we didn't expect a drop off. He's intense. He does it a little different than our previous coach, but still the same goal in mind. They're still great men, great husbands, fathers. They're just good people leading our program. So we're very, very fortunate to have Matt.
Can you speak to what we talked about off the air, Zach, and you coming to Franklin Regional and not realizing maybe how big of a hotbed Westmoreland County was before you got to FR?
Yeah, most people would say that wrestling is somewhat of a niche sport. Not everybody gets it, not everybody understands it, not everybody appreciates it. I came from my alma mater, Moon. We were okay, but when I was the AD, our matches were over in 20 to 30 minutes because we didn't even have a full lineup. I get here, my first year, Nico Megaludis as a freshman. We all know what he has done, and it's just been tremendous ever since then. It's like, oh, this is wrestling. Yeah. And I try to explain to people that Western Pennsylvania wrestling is very much like Texas football. This is the best. It's proven year in and year out. Just look at the NCAAs, how many champions, All-Americans are from Western Pennsylvania. It's staggering.
And, of course, Spencer Lee was just voted the top wrestler in the country, well, at least in the NCAA, which was a pretty cool thing, coming from Franklin Regional. And, we've been talking about the teams of the decade that Sean's been profiling, and we've been thinking about whether we want to rank them or whether we want to let people vote to see who the best team is. But certainly in the top echelon for the top teams of the decade for Sean and I have to be either the 2014 Franklin Regional team or the 2015 Franklin Regional wrestling team. It's like splitting hairs there a little bit, but just your thoughts. Obviously, you were the AD there, and your friend Eric Mauser was the head coach back then, and just the spectacular success that those two teams had, not only team-wise, but individually as well. You look at the 15 team with 4 state champions, and then the 14 team had a ton of guys win medals.
Yeah, like you said, it really is splitting hairs. And where it actually, the cool thing with wrestling, you can kind of tell when you have a good team coming, obviously. You're looking at certain weights, you know who you have. And we had seen those kids coming for a while from junior high. Actually, one of the more fun years that you didn't mention was 2013. Mm-hmm. It was all brand new to us. First time to the States. We took 3rd in the state, which was just tremendous. Such an awesome experience to see the kids. We were wrestling Easton. Franklin Regional isn't supposed to beat Easton, and that's a team that we beat in the 3rd place match, I believe it was. That was a lot of fun. And then to go to 14, we kind of thought we'd be pretty good in 14, but maybe we ended up, I think, 4th in the country. We were the top-ranked public school in that list. So that was a lot of fun. And then obviously 15, that team set the record for total points scored at the individual tournament. But just to see that collection of talent, and not just the wrestlers, but the coaches. We had a tremendous coaching staff. All of them were accomplished collegiate and high school wrestlers. It all came together.
Talking to athletic director Zach Kessler from Franklin Regional, year number 13, guiding the Panthers. You talked about the wrestling championships, of course, boys soccer. The hockey team has also captured some championships during your time there. Do you have a favorite moment or maybe a few moments that stand out during your time at Franklin Regional?
We've just talked about a few of them. I'm going to kind of be all over the place here. For me, number one is is the relationships with the kids. There's nothing better than watching a kid achieve, and I'm not just talking a state medal, but that kid who finally fought and earned a starting position on a team. Those are all great highlights. You talk about the really good teams. We've already touched on those. Very unique individuals. You didn't think you'd see another Nico Megaludis, and then comes along Spencer Lee. Not to mention Mikey Kemmer, Josh Shields, and all those guys. I mean, to have that many NCAA champions and All-Americans is tremendous. A recent one, Palmer Jackson, won the state title. That was one of my favorite days of work of all time. I went up and followed him around for those 18 holes on the last day, and that was just awesome to watch. I wouldn't even classify it as work, but that was a lot of fun. Samantha Pickens, just named to the Whippeal Hall of Fame today. 4-time state champion diver, 2-time NCAA champion. A lot of fun. A little lesser known one you guys might not have touched on was our volleyball team won their first ever section title this year. That was a lot of fun to be a part of. The coach didn't want me to, but I ordered a section banner before we actually clinched the title because we actually wanted to unveil it the night they won it. So that was a really, really cool moment. That's one that I'll remember for a while. And then they went on to their first ever state playoff win. So there's too many to name. I think we hit some of the highlights for me. It's a good place with a lot of good people.
What have you been doing with your, I guess, extra free time over the past handful of weeks? I know you still have plenty of responsibilities as the athletic director, but you mentioned before we came on, a lot of the time that you're normally dedicating towards arranging for sporting events is now freed up. Yeah.
Other than not getting a haircut, one of the things we've been working on a lot is the budget. The budget is something we have to work with every year. So I've been working a lot on that. Fall schedules, spending a lot of extra time getting ready for those. I know we're going to touch on the fall season a little bit later. We've also been recognizing our seniors as best we can. I think you guys have seen some of those on social media.
Yeah.
Trying to give them the attention they deserve. While it's not exactly what they deserve, we at least want to put it out there, let them know we're thinking about them. Our hope is at some point when we are allowed to come back together is to do some more formal recognition of our seniors. Whether that just be in the stadium in July. We would love to do that and recognize them. Getting reacquainted with my family is a big one right now. They're not used to seeing me at dinner every night, so that's a big deal. So being with my kids a lot more often is one of the positives coming out of this.
Zach, you mentioned the good people at Franklin Regional, and I want to keep on that thought because there are a lot of fine superintendents in Westmoreland County and in Western Pennsylvania, but one of our favorites is Dr. Peraino. He's such a great guy, a great person, and such a knowledgeable person. Franklin Regional, I know everyone really, really likes working for him in the school district and likes him certainly as a leader. And certainly has a great sports background as well. Yeah. So I'm sure you enjoy talking with Dr. Peraino anytime that you can. We see him at a lot of different events.
Sure. He and I work very closely together. I mean, we've become very good friends over these, I can't remember how many years it's been now. I want to say 6 or 7 years he's been in here. Yeah, he came in 2014 for our first state championship where we beat his alma mater in the state finals. Huge proponent of athletics. He knows the value of it. He played it. He coached it. So I would say he's an athletic director's dream. He knows what you need. He comes to everything. He literally does. I'll be on the sideline for soccer, for JV soccer, and I turn around, he's standing there. He's just a huge supporter of our kids, of athletics. And, not just athletics, the arts, academics. He always talks about the 3 A's. He's been a great addition to our district, and we're happy to have him.
Well, it's one thing to say it and another thing to show it, and I think he really does that by coming to the games and being in the community. A couple of other things here for you, Zach. One of the special relationships that Franklin Regional has is with Clelian Heights. You guys have a terrific relationship with Clelian Heights. I've been to events that that you guys have featured their kids, and then they've gotten an opportunity to interact with the basketball players at Franklin Regional. And I know that you guys have a assembly every year that you do a lot of different things with Clelian. Can you kind of talk about that relationship?
Sure. That relationship started, I believe this was our 10th year. A friend of mine who's a parent here and who's had multiple kids come through here, his name's Kurt Kimmick.
Sure.
He has quite a relationship with Clelian Heights and Sister Charlene, who's in charge over there. And he brought us this idea, and we were absolutely, we weren't sure what it was going to look like, but boy, we couldn't have been more pleased with how it all turned out. It started out as, I believe our first year, they played at halftime of one of our games, but we really wanted to get them an experience where it was all about them. So our principal, Mr. Suvak, we decided to make it an assembly. At the end of the day, give those Clelian kids, 1,200 kids, and our entire staff, watching them play, interact with them. It truly is their NBA championship, their Final Four. To see the kids, the way they respond, the smiles on their faces, the smiles on their parents' faces, it's very rewarding. We are very humbled that we get to host that every year. In addition to basketball, our softball team goes out there with Coach Armstrong. They do a clinic for those kids in the spring. It's been very, very beneficial for both. I would say we are both, reaping the rewards of that.
We get to see them too every year at Seton Hill University. They play, I think, pretty much every year at halftime, and they're special kids and have a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch them do what they do. So I'm glad that local school districts, especially Franklin Regional, you guys have such a good relationship with them. It's definitely really important. So
yeah.
Zach, I am a Plum graduate, and I can speak back in my days that I have fond memories of the great rivalries with the neighboring school districts. So for Plum at the time, it was Franklin Regional, Gateway, Penn Hills, Kiski area. You could throw Penn Trafford into that equation as well. And I think some of those rivalries are still intact, and I think you could speak to that from the Franklin Regional perspective. But there was an interesting proposal for football, but it really applied to all the sports for the WPIAL. Would they go with the geographic makeup, or would they stay with the classification based on enrollment size? And they pretty much went with the status quo and made a few adjustments in terms of the non-conference. Did you have a take on that? And what do you see in terms of the pros and cons of those different scenarios?
Sure. And obviously we're largely, talking about football, because I think that's where most of the focus was there. I am actually a member of the WPIAL football steering committee as well. So obviously I've been a little more involved than some others might be. But Coach Bott and I have talked about this. I don't want to say ad nauseum. We talked about it at length. While the first one was intriguing with the regional aspect, I think there was just too much imbalance. You were having a 4A school have to play somebody like a Central Catholic, or it just wouldn't have been beneficial for kids overall. I think some schools it would have been great for. It really would have helped them tremendously. But I think you need to find what works the best for the most, which is the best way to put it. So I think that's why you found them stay with more of the status quo, but trying to do it as geographically as you could.
And to that point, I would say Franklin Regional, for the most part, has been able to maintain a lot of those rivalries with schools in close proximity, correct?
It's been interesting. When I started here, when there were 4 classes, we were in AAA for the most part. So our rivals were more of Mars and Knock, Indiana, Greensburg. But then when we went to 6 classes, boy, did 5A get tough. But with 5A, you're playing your traditional rivals. You're playing those schools you border. We should play Penn Trafford and everything, regardless, and Plum, regardless of what the class actually says. That's what those kids want. They want to play the kids that they know. So to keep Penn Trafford on the schedule and Gateway, while they're very, very tough teams to play, I think it's best for us in the long run to play the better teams.
Did you have any long-term goals that you continued to work towards in terms of the future of Franklin Regional Athletics?
One of the things that Dr. P and I talk about a lot is, how do we take that next step? I think it was last year, every single one of our teams made the playoffs, which is great. How do you take that next step? So one of the things he and I have started to focus on is having a more robust strength and conditioning program. One that is, obviously football's always been in the weight room since the beginning of time. So it's trying to get all of our other teams in there under one umbrella. Have one person in charge, have a strength and conditioning coach for the whole program. So that's something we're really making a push towards, because a lot of coaches want to get in the weight room, but they may not necessarily have the training. And this isn't just about getting the kids bigger, faster, stronger. It's about injury prevention, keeping them healthy, keep them on the field. And I think that's one of our next big pushes with athletics.
Zach, with so much uncertainty right now, I mean, nobody has a clue of exactly how everything is going to get back to normal. I mean, literally, the experts aren't even sure. But as an athletics department and as a school district, how much are you guys meeting? Obviously over the internet, to plan on kind of how everything's going to look for you once everything gets back to normal. And I know those plans probably evolve constantly because, again, we're not sure how long this is going to last. But what are you doing as an athletics department in a school district to make sure that you're ready to go whenever everything returns to normal?
Right, and obviously, and rightly so, the focus right off the bat is we got to continue to educate these kids. So that was first and foremost. We have a tremendous teaching staff here, and that's well underway now. And now that we know we're not coming back, they can really focus on that. But then it's going to get down to things such as athletics. What's that going to look like? When will we be allowed to meet again? So, as you and I talked before the interview started, a lot of strong relationships with other schools, other athletic directors. So we've done a lot of brainstorming on, what might this look like when we come back? If we come back in July, will it look like this? If we can't come back till August, will we have an abbreviated season? So just kind of dealing with things as they come, but trying to have a plan A, B, C, and D, as we go, because we literally don't know, and we're hopeful and prayerful that we have our fall season and we get these kids back into school.
What have you kept yourself entertained with through the quarantine? We ask everybody about Netflix. That's what everyone's watching now. But any old sports games that you've watched or anything, or? Not
really. I have 3 kids.
Yep.
My son's 15. My daughters are 12 and 8. My son and I have a definite affinity and love for the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe. We've seen them all multiple times. We've started watching them all again. We just love it. My son's also a basketball player. We live over in Penn Trafford. He's a freshman, so I'm his practice dummy at this point. We're fortunate to have a hoop in the driveway, so it's been a lot of fun. Like I said, reconnecting with my family and actually seeing my wife and getting to sit and talk with her once in a while. So that's really been it. And like I said, that's the positive in all this, is all the time I've had with my family, because as an athletic director, you typically don't get that during the school year.
Did he take you to school one-on-one then?
I want to say there are times I get the better, but he's now taller than me, jumps higher than me, so that's good. Good for him. At this point, I just try to keep it respectable and not get hurt.
I heard some recent interviews with some NBA All-Stars that don't have their own hoops, and they haven't played at all. Jason Tatum said he hasn't played basketball since the Celtics had their last game, and I think Giannis Antetokounmpo said the same. So at least he's ahead of the game there.
Yeah, and even basketball-wise, as I said, he's at Penn Trafford, so Coach Rocco has been sending them workouts and things they can work on. So like all coaches are trying to do right now is keep some kind of connection with their kids. Heck, our girls lacrosse coach held a Zoom workout with her team this year. So everybody's trying in their own way to keep connecting with these kids, because that's what it's all about.
Well, that's the one silver lining that comes out of this, Zach. There's a lot of things that we've learned whether it be something as small as Zoom or different procedures that I'm sure the school districts have learned to make sure that they have in place. God forbid anything like this happens again. So at least we're learning a lot of things through this, that's for sure.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, if this would rear its head again in the fall, our teachers are ready to go.
Yep.
Our school system's ready to go. Again, can't do much with sports remotely, but we'll do what's best to keep our kids, healthy and safe.
Marble racing, that's a big thing right now. That's what people are watching. I don't know if you checked it out on YouTube or anything. But
I have not seen that. Racing. I know the ESPN even had the Ocho on,
right?
Showing some different sports that don't get a lot of attention.
That is our goal, to one day ascend as a network to equal ESPN 8.
You would watch Jonathan Whaley calling marble racing. I know you would.
I would watch him call just about anything.
Right.
Well, Zach, we appreciate you taking the time. I know certainly it is not under ideal circumstances, but we appreciate you and all these athletic directors talking to us and filling us in on what's going on over the last really 6 weeks or so that have been unprecedented.
Yeah, and it's also a chance I wanted to thank you guys, not just for this, but what you do for kids overall. I don't, most counties don't have something like this, and you guys have helped put Westmoreland on the map and show people that we're more than just wrestling. We have pretty strong football, basketball, baseball. You've really helped put our kids out there. You put their stories out there, help people get to know them a little better. I know guys like Coach Botter really appreciate it. His brothers that are spread throughout the country, they watch you guys, and we hear a lot of stories of families saying, "Hey, are we on Westmoreland tonight? My grandma in California wants to watch." So it's been a good thing what you guys have done.
Well, thank you, Zach, and the athletic directors in Westmoreland County are all very special and welcoming, and every time we come to Franklin Regional, especially during football season, Jonathan wants to make sure he gets his booth every Friday home game, and I know how excited he's going to be. Hopefully, when we have football coming up this fall, and you've helped us. I remember the one game a couple of years ago when one of our pieces of equipment broke, and we were rummaging through the school trying to find another piece of equipment to make the broadcast work. So I just want to thank you on behalf of Jonathan and all of us at WSN for everything you do for us. So thank you.
No, it's our pleasure.
All right, that is Zach Kessler, the athletic director for the Franklin Regional Panthers, joining us here on the Quarantine Q&A. That'll do it for this edition. For my colleague Dan Flicking or Sean Myers signing off. Catch a future episode right here. It's on the Westmoreland Sports Network.